Welcome to Work Life by Design. I'm your host, Mel Marsden. If the last few years have taught us anything, it's that change is inevitable and we no longer need to go to work to work. As a workplace dynamic strategist and the founder of COMUNiTI, I draw back the curtains on my own business, the clients and projects that we deliver, along with tapping into the knowledge and insights from academics, business leaders and champions of change. I believe that our environments have the power to positively influence our behaviour and performance, inspiring our human potential. This program was made possible with the support from the Alistair Swain Foundation. To find out more, go to alistair-swain-foundation.org. Okay, so today I am here with my good friend, Dr Meg Hooper, and she's going to be turning the tables on me today to interview me about the fact that it's 10 years that I have been in business with COMUNiTI. Now, Meg and I have done a number of projects together, including most recently Fraser Coast City Council. We've been working with the City of Gold Coast. And we've also tag teamed on a couple of projects where Meg stepped in after I've done some work with some clients, including SEQ Water and the Sunshine Coast City Council. So we've got a wealth of experience working together, and Meg has known me for a few years now. But I'm going to be handing over the reins to her today to interview me about what it's been like being in business. I have absolutely no idea what this lovely lady is going to be asking me, so I am completely at her mercy. But I'm going to hand over to her now and she can take it from there. So thanks, Meg. I appreciate you coming in and doing this for me, I think.
You know that I'm kind at heart. Absolutely. So all of these questions are really just because I think that you deserve to be showcased for 10 years. 10 years is a massive milestone and we're all really proud of you. So I am thrilled to be taking control of the questions today. All right. So I would like to start by asking you, how does it feel to run a business? And how is it different to your other work experiences? Because I think that's people who don't run businesses, you and I run businesses, and for both of us it's been a journey, an absolute journey. It cannot be described any other way. So what does it feel like to run a business as opposed to all of your other work experiences in your career?
That's a really good question. I think running a business is something that's completely unpredictable, and you can have the highest of highs from, the work that you get to do and, how things are ticking along, but you can also have the lowest of lows. And I think those things come from the fact that as someone who puts their heart and soul into what they do, your identity is very much wrapped up in the success of your business. So when things are going well, you feel like $1 million, you're on fire, you're a complete rock star, everything's going really, really well. But if things just take that downward spike, you take it hard, you take it really personally, and it can be difficult to kind of pull yourself out of that mess. You start to question whether or not this is actually the right thing for you. Are you cut out for this? Like, should I, run for the hills? And, one of the reflection posts that we put together for the COMUNiTI celebration was, the fact that I was throwing the towel and I was running off to Mullumbimby to live off the grid with my chickens and my art studio. So you do have those moments. But I think at the same time, it's something I wouldn't do differently. There's nothing else that I would do. I love running my business. I love the freedom. I love the flexibility. I love the fact that I have the choice to do what I want, when I want, how I want. And I think that's one of the things that's enabled me to build the business that I have. It's such a unique offering, what we've brought to the table, because it's really just a mix and a melting pot of all of the things that I'm particularly interested in. And, that's why we have such a great working relationship, because I'm fascinated by psychology and human behavior. And I've just brought the expertise that I don't have into the mix to be able to pull it all together and then wrap it up in a workplace. So, yeah, I hope that answered your question.
You absolutely have. And I think what you've described, you've just echoed the experience of business owners everywhere, particularly those that are trying to have impact. And I think that's something you and I share, is your comment around your identity becomes wrapped up in the work that you do anyway. It might as well be yours.
Yeah, exactly. I think. Yep, take responsibility for it all.
That's right. That's right. So when you think back over your career. Maybe talk through to help us understand what that career looked like. How did it start? What was the motivators? Because I think sometimes we won't go into careers as a young person having really different expectations of how it all went about. I know that I personally did. So where did it start, and what were some of the defining moments along the way that led you to be the amazing person that you are today, both personally and professionally, can I just say? Just in case that needs explaining to anybody.
Well, firstly, thank you. Defining moments. Okay, I think the first critical defining moment for me was actually in grade 7. And it was kind of like a showcase day of, different career opportunities. And there was a person that came along, and they were a graphics reproducer. And that meant that they basically recreated drawings that other people had done. So they would do cartoons and those sorts of things. And I was always very much the artistic kid and could replicate any drawing. You give me a picture and I could draw it out, and it would look just as good as the original. And I'm like, okay, so this is me. I'm a graphics reproducer. That's what I'm going to do. And so I kind of spent my next, high school period of time honing my graphic skills, picked all the right subjects. That's where I was going. I was going off to uni to be a graphic designer. And got to uni, I went to Queensland College of Art with Griffith University, and the first year of their program is graphics, interiors and industrial design. And got to the end of the year, I'd gone and done some work experience with a graphic design studio, and they had me doing logo design and all this other sort of stuff. And it was literally 5 minutes before I had to hand in my piece of paper to decide whether or not I was going to do graphics, interiors or industrial at the end of that first year. And I decided that I was going to go and do interiors, because there was no way in hell that I was going to be designing logos for the rest of my life. I would poke my eyes out. I couldn't think of anything worse. So I took my graphic skills and I went off to do interiors. And at that point in time, I still had no idea what the hell an interior designer was. I didn't know the difference between an interior decorator, an interior designer and an architect. I didn't know if I was responsible for holding up buildings. No idea, just kind of threw myself into this, because back then, interior design was kind of a new and emerging field, and we were very much confused with what a decorator did. And so that was kind of like my first foray into that. And I just loved it. And I went off and I found myself some work experience somewhere else. And so I worked my entire way through university, which was a good and a bad thing, because I was very practically minded. So every assessment piece was, it had to be buildable. I had to be able to produce it. It had to be very functional, which at sometimes kind of, I think, to my lecturer's dismay, impacted my ability to be free-flowing and creative. But it meant I was highly employable at the end as well, because I knew what I was doing. So that was kind of how that all kind of shaped up. And then it was one of my first positions. I was working for Haysom Architects, and I started working on the BDO Kendall's office fit out in the city. So 5 floors, 3,500 square meters. I kind of got handed this project, and I had this whole thing to run myself. And I've been, 2 years graduated at this time. So it was a pretty big deal. And from that point onwards, workplace was my happy place. And I just absolutely thrived in it, loved it, and knew that that's where I wanted to be. I did some resort work around that, did lots of hotels and hospitality work as well, but workplace was my real passion. But I think that defining moment of actually working in a lot of hospitality and hotel as well as workplace, I have this really unique mix of what I bring to a workplace. And I think a lot of my workplaces very much have that lifestyle approach, and it very much that hospitality driven, which now is, mainstream in terms of what workplaces are trying to do with their employee experience. It is very much a hospitality driven approach. And so then, went from there and went and worked for another organisation, and we did a lot of airline lounges there, but workplace and airlines was, the bread and butter. And I became a director of that business, and I became the state manager in that organisation. And then I became a director of that business, and I was there nearly 9.5 years, and loved the work I was doing, but it just wasn't a good fit for me and personally. And so I decided to leave, and, that's when COMUNiTI was born. And here we are today, and we kind of just fell back into doing workplace by design and by choice. But also we did a lot of work in the airline sector as well, until our mate COVID came along and that kind of evaporated. But workplace has been very deliberate for me, because I really enjoy bringing all of those aspects together. I really enjoy the process of understanding a business and looking at how we can continue to elevate that employee experience, bringing all that lifestyle piece and all of that hospitality aspect back into the project. But yeah, that's kind of how the journey kind of morphed and shaped along the way.
I love that serendipity that you speak to most people, their career has some sort of serendipity in it. And I love that. I just happened to work on this project. I just happened to do these things. And just a little spark, a little spark happened. And I think if I reflect on your philosophy, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about that a little later, around the philosophy that you bring to your designs. I love that idea that what we see in a community or in Mel Marsden building has that sense of hospitality and that sense of service about it, even if it's a place I'm going to work every day. I just love that. Yeah, it's such an amazing story and such an amazing consolidation of experiences to create a philosophy, really.
Yeah, it was pretty cool to sort of think back about how it all kind of came together. And, when I started the business, and the business started, I was going on a career break after I left the previous organization because I'm just like, I need some time out here. But I had a couple of clients who kind of rang me and said, hey, we've got these projects. And so, a month later, here I am, I've got a business and off the go, and had employees. But I really wanted to create a workplace strategy business from the outset. But if I did that, I think we would have all starved. That was the way I kind of framed it, because people didn't really understand what workplace strategy was back then. And so we did interior design and we did all sorts of projects, but we had this side serve of workplace strategy. And I think it's only been in the last 5 years that we've really flipped that and we've become a workplace strategy studio that does design. So it's been a really interesting journey.
Yeah, and I think it's almost you've been responsible for educating an industry, really. And I know that there are other people working in the space, and you've often referred to the people that people you look up to in this space, but there haven't been very many. And I think that's the responsibility we carry, right, when we move into these new territories, is that we're not only trying to feed our families, but we're also educating an entire industry about what the possibilities are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think
that's admirable. Everyone should be cheering you on. I am.
Thank you. And look, that is exactly one of the things that I know that I have to do, is because when I go and I start talking to organizations about what we do and how we do it, the common response is, we didn't even know that this was a thing. We thought, we need a workplace, we go speak to an architect. And so it's re-educating a whole industry, even people within the industry, around what are some of the steps that we can take here? How do we go about this? What are we going to do to get the best outcome? And so that's why I go and I speak at conferences and I speak at events, so I have the podcast so that I can help as many people as possible understand the other ways that we can approach this to get really great results for our workplaces.
Yeah. And I think for me, something that stands out in all of this is your heavy focus on the experience of the workplace. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because for me, as this is where we overlap. And yes, we worked professionally on some projects together, and there's been a little bit of a tag teaming, but we're also great friends, and everything we say to each other resonates. It's almost like it was the silver linings of COVID, wasn't it?
Yep.
Because we met each other because of COVID.
We did. On a webinar.
And if we hadn't met each other on a webinar.
Yeah.
It was amazing. And I think there are some silver linings of COVID there. But where we overlap is in this idea that, we spend, I don't know, when we ask the question, what do we get? We get between 60 and 100% of my waking hours thinking about work, traveling to work, being at work, I don't know, delivering work. Why shouldn't we be able to design that experience in the way that suits us, in the way that we want it to be? So when did experience really start to feature in your thinking about workplaces?
I think it's been there for a really, really long time. And I think that's always been something that has been quite prominent in the work that I've done, is I've always been very conscious of creating a space that reflected the actual organisation. And I think in my early days, I probably was a bit more fixated on the brand color palette, but I think I've definitely evolved beyond that to really understand what brand experience is. And it's so much deeper, and it really is about bringing the cultural essence of the organization to life and really starting to shape the way that you want people to feel when they come into your environment. And so many workplaces I walk into are so bland. They're grey, they're white, they're beige and shades of beige. And, particularly when organizations are looking to, take over an existing space, it's got no personality that actually speaks to them as an organization. And I think that's a really big missed opportunity because, as you said, we spend so much time working. And, prior to COVID, we spent a lot of time in our workplaces. And, and I'd actually say even now, our workplace is far more important than it was previously because these are the places we want to try and attract people back to. And if they're very beige and, nondescript and they have no real personality about them, why would I want to go and spend my time in an environment like that when I can stay in an environment that is of my own creation, in my own home? And so I think creating a workplace that really speaks to the culture of the organization, that brand personality, it really connects people to the organization itself. I think that's a really important factor in creating a workplace experience because no two organizations are the same. I can work with 10 different accounting companies and create a different response for each of them, both in layout, in color, materiality, everything, because the makeup of that organization is so different from one to the next. They've all got a different purpose. They've all got a different set of values. They've got a different culture. They've got different teams and departments. They've got a different way of being about them that space then needs to reflect. That's what brings that essence in so that when I walk into a space, I should get an instant idea of who they are just by experiencing that environment. The sounds that I hear, the textures, the smells, everything that I can see is all giving me, those subconscious cues about what it's like to do business with these people. And I think that is something that I really embed into the work that I do and have done for quite some time. And I'd say, probably the earliest point where I really thought about this was be over 12 years, it'd be 13, 14 years ago now. And it was with Asenco, and I did their fit out for them at South Brisbane. And we actually built an airline lounge in their reception. Very small, but the intention for that was that it was a business lounge for their clients to be able to stay in a luxurious space, have connection to the internet, be able to, work there rather than having to go back out to the airport. They had tea and coffee there. And we also had a cafe on the ground floor. Now, these were the kinds of things that were really quite progressive back then and, quite mainstay now. But I'd say that was probably the first project where I saw that actually being implemented.
That's incredible. And I think this is one of the things that I find fascinating about your work is it's the embodiment of the experience through space and how you convert that language of culture and brand and experience and then turn it into a space. That is the most, I don't know, it's the most rewarding part of working with you other than you're an amazing person is that watching that happen. As I said, you've educated a whole in you and others have educated a whole industry and certainly educated me. And I think the combination of space and experience and function, I think organizational function is how I would describe how workplace strategy has started to emerge as a discipline. And that, when we're designing a building, we do a functional brief. That now has a completely different flavour to it than the old days. What's your observations of how workplace strategy has emerged like that? And I know you mentioned it's sort of relatively recently that the tables have turned on people actually investing in this space before they go, I want blue, nobody ever says they want blue, do they? I mean, surely not.
They do. They do. What do our workplaces look like when we no longer need to go to work? As organisations navigate a new frontier, struggling to work out what's next in today's hybrid and distributed world, how can we leverage one of our greatest assets, our workplace? My book, The Next Workplace, Designing Dynamic Environments That Inspire Human Potential, will show you how to leverage your workplace to attract and retain talent, increase employee engagement, and elevate employee experience, plus deliver bottom line returns on your investment. The Next Workplace is the ultimate playbook. It will inspire your thinking, show you how to unlock the data in your business, provide you with the resources to build your business case with confidence, and reveal the proven frameworks and practical tools to align, enable, and inspire the human potential within your organisation. So, to grab your copy and begin to reimagine your next workplace, head over to my website, melissamarsden.com.au/book.
How are you observing this workplace strategy combination of function and space and experience and culture and brand and all those sorts of things coming together? And what do you think is the next thing for workplace strategy? If you could crystal ball.
I know what I'd like it to be. I'll get to that. Okay. So I think the early adoption of this started in the UK, and that's where I was definitely looking to for my early kind of inspiration around this. And, you know, I could only see what I could see from the outside because I wasn't able to work within any of these businesses, but I saw common challenges when I was going into workplaces. And that was basically they'd already leased a space. They had 100 people and they said, right, well, we're going to give 10 of those people an office and the other 90 people get a workstation, stick them in the box. And so really my job was space planning. I was a puzzle creator. Like I basically had to fit the jigsaw puzzles into the box to make sure it all fitted. And that's, you know, one thing you get very good at being a designer. That's the, you know, a principal part of your job. But the bits that were missing was I knew nothing about the business. I knew nothing about what they were trying to achieve. I knew nothing about their brand. I knew nothing about their values. And so I started doing this as a bit of a value add service when I first started exploring this. So I was looking at what other organizations were doing and reading and trying to see how things were kind of coming together. And, you know, I was always fascinated with business and always really interested in how other businesses ticked. And I saw, you know, businesses that had really great sort of people energy when I walked in there. Like people were excited and they were happy. And I walked into others and it was stone quiet, you know, and there was this kind of anxiety that you felt in the space. And it was really interesting. And I wanted to understand, well, why is this happening? Like, what is it about this? And, you know, this is what I later learned to be culture. And it was interesting because I started asking questions around, well, what are your values and where do you see your business in 5 years? And you should have seen the looks that I used to get. Like, you're the designer. You just put us in the box and you put the pretty colors on top, right? You know, what do you need to know about what our values are? And why would you care, you know, where our business is going in the next 5 years? They really didn't understand the opportunity that the space had to perform to support any of those sorts of goals. And so it was a really, as I said, a big education process to get people to understand. And over time, it's become easier because, you know, I've been educating and people know that that's what I do. And that's why you would come to me because I can support you in these ways. And, you know, in many ways, what I do can be really quite obvious, but it's actually having had the thought to put it together. And, you know, that starts to come over time as well. And my work has evolved as well with every other conversation or every client or the feedback that I get. That has changed my perception of, you know, how I approach something as well. And it's, you know, always for the better. So I think that's kind of those early infancies of where it sort of started. And it meant that I started looking at values. I started looking at culture. I started looking at information flow, communication flow. I started looking at the way that the physical space was either enabling or creating roadblocks to those communication flows, how it was actually facilitating the creation of silos in businesses, and looking at what those departmental interactions needed to be. You know, if two teams were needing to work quite closely and quite collaboratively together, were they at opposite ends of the building? You know, all of those sorts of things started to come out. You know, where were we providing collaboration spaces for organizations to be able to actually connect other than in a meeting room? And so all of these things just sort of slowly kind of continue to bubble along. And I think even just before COVID, I was still beating my head against a wall many, many times trying to get clients to understand the impact or the value of this work. And sometimes we kind of just did it out of love and, you know, as a freebie that kind of got thrown in because we knew we'd create a better project as a result. So it kind of just become a value out of what we did by you guys engaging with us. But then over time after COVID, it really started to shape a completely different industry because all of a sudden people really understood the impact of their workplaces. We really then understood what they did other than house us from Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, for people to come and do their work. They were this social connector, this creator of culture, and this place that really embodied who we were as an organisation and enabled our people to come together in, a singular space that meant they were all on the same page. And so I think that then started to shape that. And even my own idea of workplace started to change after that, because I started to realise the value of routine and ritual. Because the routine of getting up and going to work every day and the steps that we take to transition through a space was mentally setting us up. And you mentioned Libby Sander, and she talks about cognitive scaffolding. And that's exactly what our environments do. They set us up to behave and perform in a particular way. And as a designer and a workplace strategist, I have the ability to influence that cognitive structure. Like, I can change the way that people will show up to work by the way that I create that space. And that's when that light bulb moment kind of hit me. And it was in the middle of COVID during those lockdowns. And I went, that's it. It's routine and ritual. And the spaces that I create can help to enhance performance by the way that I guide people through it. And that is in response to the way that the business wants their people to be able to engage. And this comes back to the things that you and I talk about, and that's values and behaviors. And, you talk about for the fact that culture is just a series of behaviors that are repeated in patterns. And it's patterns of behavior, effectively, I think is the right way that you actually describe it. And when I understand what are the behaviors that an organization needs or requires for their business to perform, then I can help shape those behaviors by the way that we assemble the space, the types of furniture and the work settings that we use, the types of materials, the colors, all of those things start to influence that behavior.
We could talk forever about this. We know that we could. And we probably bore your audience to tears with me reflecting on how fascinating I find the connection between space and psychology. And I think that's, that's our mode, right? That's our mojo. Yeah. What about the future of workplace strategy as a discipline? Where do you see it going from here?
Okay. This is my little prediction for what I'd like to see happen in the future. I think there is so much more opportunity for data. And this is the piece that is really missing in the work that I do at the moment is we talk about it, we need it, we want it, but actually getting it is really, really difficult. Now, there's all sorts of data that's available in organizations, and most of it I can get. What I can't get, and this is where the biggest impact at the moment is around utilization data. How much time are people actually spending in these particular spaces, and what tasks and activities are they doing? Now, I think that that's going to start to progressively change over time, but right now it's one of these big missing gaps. We have to go in and we have to put sensors in. It's an expensive exercise. It's a temporary thing. It does give us that real-time data. The old manual way is we walked around with a piece of paper and put dots on it to say who was at the desk and who wasn't, but it was done at a point in time across the day. So they could have just gone to the toilet for the moment and you wouldn't know. So it's inaccurate. And so we never really have a very strong, solid baseline to be able to measure things against. And the reason that this is important is because when I ask you how much time you spend at your desk, most people will say, I spend about 80% of my day at my desk. The reality is when we get this data back, it's usually a lot more like 40 to 50% of the day. Yes, you're in the building. Yes, you're at work, but you're not physically sitting at your desk. You're either, in a meeting, you're having a conversation with Joe over there. There's all these other things that are happening. And so, when we're seeing organizations using swipe card data into lifts and doors and things like that, that's only saying that they're on the premises. It's not actually telling me what they're doing or where they are at. So that's one big piece that I think is going to really revolutionize what we're doing. The other half of that is then when we get people into our new spaces, having that sensor data and that information coming back so that we can continue to evolve, adapt, and improve our spaces. So we know that collaboration setting over there is always being used. It's being used by this many people, but that one over there not being used. Let's investigate why. Let's put some more time and effort into actually, humanly watching and seeing what's happening, asking questions, and then potentially adapting that space so that it is improved, so that we're actually making our rental, we're paying a cost, per square meter rate here. Let's make that actually work for us. So there are two aspects. The other thing that I would be absolutely fascinated to do and explore further, and again, going back to some of Libby Sander's work, she's done a lot of studies around open plan and the physiological changes that people experience when they're in open plan and, you know, how their body reacts to stress from noise and other things. We don't have any data on good workplaces. So I would love to put one of my workplaces up there, one of the projects that I have done, and say, let's put a study through this. And I'd like to see how people are reacting to that space. But there's a couple of caveats that I need to put around that, because people actually need to know how to use the space effectively in order to get accurate data. Because if you don't like sitting in an open plan and you're sitting at a workstation and there's lots of noise going on around you and you're trying to do a concentrative task, you're not using the space effectively. So you're getting, you know, incorrect data. So it's got to be monitored in that way. But the other side of that is actually then looking at how people's individual personalities and preferences are then influenced by those spaces. So if I'm dealing with somebody who's a lot more introverted, you know, has trouble concentrating, you know, doesn't particularly like external stimulants, putting them in a collaborative space is obviously not going to be a good outcome for them. But having those other spaces where they can go to and utilize, you know, quiet spaces, you know, low sensory rooms, those sorts of things will enable them to, you know, ideally perform better. So I would love to do some correlation between individual personality profiles and the use of space, and seeing how our more modern workplaces are actually supporting that type of workflow and structure and performance in our people.
That's fascinating. And because I sometimes refer to that level of thinking where we're taking individual personality, because personality is very individual variable, and we're creating system responses to that. And it's almost like this mass personalized design. It's like personalized design, but at scale, so that it's affordable, and we can fit lots of, you know, we have organizations of large numbers. We can actually mass personalize this approach to design. And you're right, data is absolutely essential. We both agree that data is key moving forward in all sorts of areas of psychology and workplace function as well. I think where I'd like to go now is to start to talk about what you've learned about yourself along the journey. So we can go as deep as you like. You know I'm here for you if you decide to go super deep on this one. So you've been in very senior roles throughout your career and have chosen to start a small business, which is effectively, you know, what we do. Small businesses go. Yep. So what have you learned about leadership along the way, and what has COMUNiTI given you from a learning opportunity around leadership?
Firstly, leadership is hard. It's certainly not.
Okay, great. Well, that's it. You've wrapped it up.
Done.
That's all we need to say.
And I know you will agree with me. It is not something that I think comes easily. It's something that you have to work at, and it is something that you have to continually put effort into and to grow in. And, you know, I got put into my first senior leadership position and I was 25. Like, I had no idea what I was doing. And I don't think I did it very well, to be perfectly honest. And I look back at that and go, shit, I wish I'd actually done things a few things a bit differently. But I grew from that. And I think, you know, I've learned to kind of forgive myself, I suppose, in a way, for some of the mistakes that I made as someone younger, and then just made the decision that as I go forward, I will always do better. I will always learn from yesterday, and I will always become a better leader as I grow. And I think even the leader that I am now to the leader I was 2 years ago, I am a completely different person. And that has come through choice. It's through surrounding myself with good role models. It's through seeking out, you know, education and learning and, you know, observing what other people are doing and educating myself in spaces that I, you know, had not been previously educated. You know, coming into this industry, I was trained as a designer. I was not trained to be a leader. That is something I've had to learn to do over time. And I also look to the leaders that were above me previously, and they weren't always the greatest role models. I'm trying to put that as tactfully as possible. And unfortunately, I did replicate a lot of that behavior because that's what I thought leadership looked like. And, you know, as a very young female in a male-dominated industry with male leaders, you thought that that was how things got done around here. Like, that's what it looked like. And I really have had to write my own rule book as I've gone through. And sometimes I've slipped back into old ways and not the way that I would want to lead forward. And then I've had to kind of catch myself and reset and go, right, well, this is actually what I think needs to happen now. And this is how I want to lead going forward, and made really conscious decisions around that. I've learnt a lot about myself. And I think self-awareness is a huge component of this. You cannot be a good leader if you do not have good self-awareness, but then action on the back of that. Like, it's great to say, yep, that was, I shouldn't have done that, or I shouldn't have done this, or I shouldn't have done this. But to actually then do something about it, I think, is then the next thing. And I think that is the piece that's really important, is obviously the action to take those steps to behave in a particular way, to lead in a particular way, to make decisions about the types of things that you communicate and how you communicate. And I think, I'm still learning, still getting better, still seeking out those mentors and those role models to kind of see what good looks like, and, continuing to expand my skill set in that space every day.
Love it. One of the things that I admire most about you is your ability to learn and to rebound from a situation that wasn't ideal, or a situation that didn't go exactly as we wanted it to. Yeah, and it's certainly something that I look to you for, is to say, how would Mel do this?
Oh, I'm glad that I've become that person.
What would Mel do now? A little bit more of a curlier question. Okay. And I guess this is something that we have talked a little bit about more on a personal level. So one of the challenges of being a small business owner and having so much of your identity wrapped up in your work, because we love our work. Let's face it, we are both passionate people. One of the things that I am slowly emerging from the bubble of whatever it is along the way is, how do you ensure that doesn't become about my self-worth, is tied up in my work, and that who I am and my worth as a human, is it solely about my work? And I know this is a curly one because I don't think I've nailed this personally. And you'd think I'd have the tools of the trade to do it, wouldn't you?
Yeah, isn't that your job? But look, we're all human beings, right?
Yeah.
And that is a really difficult question to answer. And I agree. I don't think I've completely nailed it yet either, but I think that I'm a lot further forward than I was. There's been a few things that I've done quite deliberately to try and extract myself from that. And that's been around, one of the biggest things was rebranding the business, to be honest. So 5 years ago, we went from Milestone Collective and became COMUNiTI. And that was a big moment for me, because I had to kind of separate myself from COMUNiTI. We had to be two different things. And before that, I felt like we were very much one and the same. And, I'm still a huge part of COMUNiTI. Like, it's still my baby, it's my business. But there was some sort of psychological barrier that I could cross there by separating the two. So that was one of the biggest things. The other thing was to start talking about the business more holistically. It wasn't, Mel, it was COMUNiTI. So even language changes made a big difference to kind of starting to separate that. But again, I think it's come back to that self-awareness. I've had to find value and worth in myself that wasn't associated with the business. And I think for so long I have been so career driven that there was not much going on outside of work for me to be able to have any self-worth. And so I had to find other endeavors to make myself feel successful, to feel like I had some value. And to be honest, I think the podcast was probably one of those things. Like, there's no failing in that. Like, it's kind of like, I'm going to do episodes, I'm going to put it out there, and it's done. Like, there's no real feedback loop on that one. And I think that's the other big thing I've learned, is the feedback loop is what will help you kind of feel successful. Surrounding yourself with amazing people so that you're getting positive reinforcement and affirmation from other people. And it's not purely coming from, did you win that project? Did you meet budget this month? Did we win that award? Was that client happy with the outcome? Trying to find other ways to reinforce your value that isn't associated with your business or your career or your job or whatever that might be for you. But I think that's some of the things that I've had to do, has really been around finding other ways to give myself a sense of value that isn't work. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I love that. You nailed it. Oh, you're on fire today, Lee. So the kind of the final thing that I wanted to talk to you about is the role of collaboration in your life. You and I are big collaborators. You know, I value collaboration above many other things. I want people to hear from you how much this is an important part of your life. We've spoken about this before, that the limits of our world are the limits of the people that are around us. And so, yeah, I'd love to hear, how did collaboration just become such a big feature of your work?
For me, it's always been there. But in some of the previous businesses I worked in, collaboration was seen as competition. And so there was very little of it allowed. And I always had this view when I started, you know, and in those days it was Milestone Collective. And there was a very purposeful reason why there was the word collective. And it was about the fact that I wanted to bring together the right people for the project and create these teams. And that would extend from graphic designers to psychologists, to property agents, to project managers, to consultants, anyone that was needed to bring that team together to create that project and bring it to life was going to be sitting underneath this umbrella of Marsden Collective to create these projects. Now, there was a bit of a selfish aspect in that. It meant that I didn't have to have all these people on the payroll to be able to deliver these amazing projects and have this, you know, world-class team of people delivering these projects. But it also meant that I could have access to these world-class people to be able to deliver, you know, first-class service to these clients and give them a very holistic experience of delivering a project, because I knew how to bring people together. That's, you know, one of my little superpowers. I know how to bring people together. I know how to find the right people to come together to gel on a project and deliver an outstanding experience. And so that has always been at the heart of it. In the early days of Marsden Collective, though, it actually proved to be really difficult to do. And it proved to be difficult because the access to the freelancers and the consultants and contractors that I wanted just wasn't there. They weren't of the standard that I needed. And so we kind of had to then go back to an employee model, but we would bring in, you know, experts in different ways. But then what's happened is over time, COVID has changed a lot of things again. There are so many more people who have gone out on their own. They've taken the leap into, you know, being a freelancer or a consultant or a contractor. And so all of a sudden, my pool has grown exponentially. I now have all of these people that I can tap into. And so that's how it's kind of morphed and changed. And that's why at the moment, that's what COMUNiTI looks like. We look like an assembly of freelancers, consultants, contractors that are brought together that all are experts in their field to be able to deliver, you know, fantastic results for our clients. And, you know, it also gives me the ability to take on projects that are a little bit left of center because we can build a team around it. And, you know, this is why you and I have worked together so nicely, is because we've brought our respective expertise together to deliver something highly unique to the market, to be able to solve problems that no one else has been able to solve yet. And that's because we've got new problems to solve. Like, work is different, workplaces are different. COVID has changed everything. We've now got flexible work, we've got hybrid, we've got all of these things that are new challenges. So we need new ways of working in new partnerships to create new ideas to solve these new problems. And that means I get to bring in employee experience managers and, you know, yourself in psychology, and we can work with project managers, and we can bring graphic designers in and all these other sorts of really cool people to create these really great outcomes.
Good teams to solve good problems, right?
That's it. Can't be done without it.
Well, Melissa Marsden, I am honoured to be your friend, and I'm honoured to be a collaborator. On that note, it's just a delight to see your growth over the years that I've known you as a person, as a leader, as a business owner, but also, you know, watching you educate a whole industry around what workplace strategy could be and incorporating that into the way that you do your work. It's been a real privilege to walk alongside you on that journey. Thank you for letting me take the reins today.
No, thank you. And look, thank you for those lovely comments. And I've really enjoyed this. I had no idea what you were going to ask me, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's nice to sit back and reflect on where you've been and in a different way. They weren't the questions I thought you were going to come at me with, so there you go.
Well, I'm glad. Surprise and delight. That's what I am.
Absolutely. It's been a wonderful experience, and thank you for doing this for me. I really do appreciate it, and I love the fact that we get to work together and we get to do some pretty cool stuff together.
Yeah, me too.